morning, everyone. My name is Elyse Severson. As Pastor Jacob mentioned, I am the prevention manager and have been for the last 5 years. Before we get started, I just want to say thank you so much for, one, inviting me here, but also supporting House of Ruth so diligently throughout the years. I know that every Christmas, UCC holds Alternative Christmas, and we've been participating in that for so long, and all of those donations go straight to House of Ruth. And truly, it's so impactful. The clients at House of Ruth receive so many donations. Our shelter benefits from it so greatly. So we are very appreciative. Thank y'all. And I also just want to share and be transparent with you all. This is my first in-person presentation in almost 2 years. So I'm so thankful that I can be here with you all. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and get started. This presentation is going to focus a little bit around two things: House of Ruth services and domestic violence. Just kind of the 101 basic information that we would love the community to know. So if at any point you all have any questions, feel free, shout them out. I will repeat them for the folks online, but I would love to hear from y'all. All right. Okay, so just a few services that we offer and just a small history around House of Ruth. We started in 1977. Actually, a few women who attended the Claremont Colleges, 3 women who decided that they wanted to run a hotline. They said, we want to hear from the community. What are their struggles? What's going on? And they noticed that through that hotline, multiple and almost all calls were coming through focusing on domestic violence. And they said, you know, in a perfect world, we would want to help everyone, but we're going to focus our hotline specifically on domestic violence. And so that's when the hotline began in 1977. Shortly after, they were able to purchase a home here in Claremont, and that became the emergency shelter. It was a smaller house, and then I believe in 1997, House of Ruth was able to purchase the location that we are in now, and that is our outreach office. And it's a fairly large office, and we're able to run a lot of different services through there. So we have our emergency and transitional shelter, which are held at an undisclosed location. And then we have our community services program that helps folks meet weekly with a case manager to identify their needs, their plan, kind of work through whatever they're dealing with right now. And then through there, they get referred to either counseling, a legal team, or a housing team. So they get to meet with one person first and then identify their needs from there. We have a children's program at the shelter as well as at the outreach office. And so at the shelter, we have a teacher come in every day and help students who are there leaving their abusive situation learn what they would be missing at school. We know that it's not safe for them to return to the home school that they were at because of the risk that it imposes. So we have a teacher come in and kind of fulfill all of those educational needs for them. We have the prevention program, which is the department that I run. Primarily, we focus on high school students. And so we want young folks to understand relationships. We want them to understand what a healthy relationship looks like. What are the signs of, the warning signs of domestic violence, of teen dating violence. We want them to feel confident in leading their relationships. Truly, I mean, I don't know about you all, but I wish that I had this kind of information growing up to say, oh yeah, that doesn't seem so healthy to me. Thankfully, I did not encounter an abusive relationship, but surely that could have been a part of my story if, you know, I wasn't knowledgeable or if my mother didn't speak to me about these things. So it's definitely an important program. We also discuss these topics with college students. We do know that 18 to 24-year-olds are impacted by domestic violence the most. And so we want to target college students as well. And truly anyone who's willing to want to learn this information. We speak to hair salons, to nail salons. We know that, you know, individuals who get their hair done spend 4 hours plus at a hair salon. So, the things that you can talk about while you get your hair done sometimes really turn into an intimate conversation. So we want to train hairstylists and nail technicians to have these conversations with their clients. We do have a housing program. So the housing program is extremely helpful. One of the barriers for folks leaving domestic violence relationships is housing. Where am I going to live? How am I going to pay my rent if the person who is causing harm is my financial provider? So we have a housing program that gets folks set up. We are the third party. We help them find housing through another agency who's willing to pay for it. So it's a really helpful program. Also, not only financially is the barrier, but it's also that looking for housing requires a lot of time, calling places. Are you renting a place or whatever it may be? So we have a housing navigator that does the work for the client. So it's a really great program that's so helpful, and it really has been successful in really helping clients find permanent housing as well. We do have a counseling program. It is completely free, as all the other services at House of Ruth as well, but I tend to highlight this only because counseling can be very expensive. So we do have a free counseling program. The chat program is part of the counseling program. It's for anyone under the age of 18 who needs counseling services. And the really wonderful thing about the chat program is that it does not need to be domestic violence related. It can be any traumatic experience that the person under 18 has experienced. So that can be school bullying, teen dating violence. It could be maybe their parents are getting divorced and that has been really impactful for them. It could be just a bad breakup and they don't know how to cope. It could be anything that's been traumatic for them. And then the volunteer program. I love highlighting this program because really House of Ruth could not be successful without the volunteers that come through the program and through the agency. Every summer and every winter, we host a 40-hour training. Once you go through that 40-hour training, you are eligible to volunteer anywhere within House of Ruth. So if the shelter is tugging at your heart, or if working with the children is something that you're passionate about, you have access to volunteer anywhere within the agency. Or if you're like, hey, I want to speak in front of people and tell them about House of Ruth, you can come join my department. So I would appreciate that. All right, so these are some of the services. Does anyone have any questions so far? Any of my folks online? I'm going to try to be techie and see the chat. I can't promise that it'll work. Okay, Mel, no worries. I am glad that you are here. We'll go ahead and move forward. Okay, so getting into the details of domestic violence, just the exact definition. Whenever you think of domestic violence, in the future, please think of these two words, power and control. So it's a pattern of behavior with the effect of establishing power and control over another person through fear and intimidation. And so abuse happens when abusers believe that they have the right to control their partner and the right and the entitlement to really have all the say-so in the relationship. When you're in a healthy relationship, both voices are heard and they're taken into account. Abusive relationships, one person has the overarching voice. All right. So these are some domestic violence statistics. Victims can be any gender or intimate partner relationship type. 1 out of 4 women will be victimized at a domestic violence relationship, 1 out of 7 men, and 1 out of 3 teens. All of these statistics are alarming. When I first started doing this work 7 years ago, it was 1 out of 4 women, but 1 out of 7 men. It was 1 out of 12 men, 1 out of 9 men, and now we're at 1 out of 7 men. So can I just hear from you all why you all think that we're currently at 1 of 7 instead of the 1 in 9 and 1 in 12? What do you all think has changed in the last few years?
If more people are free enough to now support that, where they might have felt there was so much more that they.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. you know, as an agency and as a domestic violence movement, we don't think we're necessarily at the stage we want to be. However, doors have opened up for men to begin disclosing their abuse. There is a lot of stigma and a lot of taboo and a lot of maybe just, I don't even know what you would call it, but there's a lot of shame around, I guess shame is the word I'm looking for, shame around disclosing domestic violence as a male. And so, you know, the domestic violence movement has worked really hard to open up doors for men to be able to feel comfortable reporting. We're not where we're at. We want to be, but it's getting a little closer. So that's why men have also, the statistic has gone up. And then, yeah.
Is there also a broader definition of domestic violence, domestic violence and verbal
Oh yeah.
abuse?
Tomas, you are ahead of the game. Yes, we are going there because that is part of it. And, you know, a lot of folks hear domestic violence and feel like, oh, well, they're not getting physically abused. You're not a victim of domestic violence. That is, couldn't be further away from the truth. So we're going to tap into the types of violence right after this slide. So this last statistic is 1 in 3 teen relationships. That is highly alarming, especially just because, you know, they're just starting their relationship journey. They're just tapping into what it feels like to be in an intimate partner relationship, and to know that at the start of that journey, they're going to be hit with an intimate partner who is abusive. That is scary and it's saddening. So that's part of why we focus so heavily on the youth communities, because we want them to begin knowing what it looks like to be in a healthy relationship. Yes.
With teen relationships, obviously, violence is happening in the home, it can be happening to teens. And
When's Mid-Autumn Festival?
with that, and the teen comes to you as school are,
You don't hear the questions.
Yeah. Okay, let me go ahead and repeat that for those folks online.
Thank you.
Sandy. So Sandy asked, if domestic violence is happening in the home and the teen is also experiencing domestic violence within their own relationship, do I have an obligation to report that? And so that can be a little tricky. I am a mandated reporter. And so if a student comes to me and says, hey, I am going through a teen dating violence relationship, and they do tell me about their life at home, depending on what it is at home, whether they've seen their parents get into a physical altercation or the student discloses that it is emotional or verbal abuse. If the child has been harmed in the process of that physical altercation, I am a mandated reporter and I will report that. Teen dating violence looks a little different. I would share that with the counselor, the school counselor, and say, I would let the student know first, you know, hey, I am a mandated reporter. I want you to be able to confide in me and trust me. You can tell me what you feel comfortable telling me. If it involves you hurting yourself, hurting someone else, or any physical harm to you at home, then I will have to report this to your counselor. So I do share that with them, only that so that they feel they have control over what they say to me and control over the actions that are going to come from telling me. A lot of the reason as to why teens don't disclose to an adult is because the fear of reporting. Am I going to get taken away from my parents? Like, what is this going to cause for my parents? So a lot of fear comes from adults reporting something to the police or to CPS. And so I do disclose that to them so that they can pick and choose what they want to share with me. It does get tricky though, because I do want to know if they're getting hurt at home. But I do work closely with the school counselor and I say, hey, this student is experiencing dating violence. Is it reportable? And so we always call the child CPS, and there's a CPS hotline where you can call and say, this student discloses to me, is this reportable? And they'll tell you yes or no. And so I've done that multiple times just to cover my bases. I call anytime it involves a minor and there is physical abuse, I will call and say, the student said this to me, and they'll give me the green light to further the investigation. Yeah. Thank you though, Cindy. Alrighty. So some warning signs for domestic violence: unreasonable or extreme jealousy, possessiveness, controlling behavior. All of this warrants a red flag. Why are you this jealous about me seeing a friend? Or why are you this jealous about me joining a women's group at church or a men's group at church? Anything that is part of your daily life and should be seen as going out and having a good time or growing and learning for yourself, and this person that you're dating is, or husband or partner, has an unreasonable jealousy around it. Possessiveness, the idea that one partner belongs to the other. Controlling behavior, all of this becomes very alarming when in a relationship. And a lot of the time, this is very manipulative. It doesn't have to be, controlling behavior doesn't have to be standing in front of the door and saying, you're not going. I'm going to control who you see and who you don't see. It could look like, hey, I'm going to go see my friends today. And the abusive partner says something like, oh, I really wish you wouldn't. Like, I want to hang out with you today. I have something planned for you today. And then partner says, okay, that sounds great. Hi, friends, I can't go anymore. And that happens multiple times. And so the abusive partner isn't using any type of physical abuse. They're using manipulative tactics to isolate the partner. Because once someone has maybe denied an invitation somewhere multiple times, friends aren't going to ask you anymore, right? They always say no, or why should I invite them? They've never come before. And so that creates isolation for the survivor, for the victim, leaving the victim or survivor dependent on the abusive partner. All right, so we'll just go over these fairly quickly. Do any of these stand out to you all? Anything that feels like, why should that be on there, or why is that on there? Some of them that some question of these that I typically get is maybe violence with the car. That can look like getting into an argument while in the car and someone is weaving in and out of lanes or speeding or ditching and leaving you places. So, you expect in a healthy relationship when you drive somewhere together that you're going to come home with that person and that you have a ride home. In an abusive relationship, everything is very unpredictable. Abusive behavior is very up and down. And so when there's an altercation or a fight or an argument, they decide to leave their partner wherever it is that they are. Typically, this ends up happening in an unsafe place for the survivor or the victim. We've had multiple people go up to Mount Baldy and get in a fight and leave their partner up at Mount Baldy by themselves. We all know there's no cell reception up there. There's, it can become a very dangerous place. So those are some of the questions that I get around physical abuse. So emotional, mental, and verbal abuse, again, the extreme or unreasonable jealousy, control over what they wear or who they're with, and the I love you, but I would die without you. Why do you all feel that that could be emotional, mental, or verbal abuse? I love you, but. I love you, but. Oh. Yeah, it sets a qualification for love. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so what this is saying is it's very conditional, right? I love you, but don't hang out with your friends. I love you, but don't wear makeup. I love you, but don't go play soccer on Sundays, or whatever it is. I love you, but it sets an expectation for the love. And so we're all human. We all have the need and desire to be loved by someone. And so when someone puts a condition on love, oftentimes our emotional needs ride over our reasoning, right? We want to be loved. And so we're going to do things that make us feel loved. And this person's asking for something, we're gonna comply and we're gonna do that because we want to be loved. Yes.
The other side is increasing the victimhood. I say, it's your fault.
That you're not gonna be loved. Yeah, right. Right, absolutely. So folks online, Sandy had said, like, it's your fault that this is happening to you. So creating that sense of victimhood and also, blaming the survivor or the victim as to why this may be happening to them. Manipulation or creating a sense of worthlessness, destruction of a victim's personal property. This happens so often, and sometimes a lot of folks may think that it's trivial that something, maybe the abusive partner broke their necklace or broke whatever it is. We've had a lot of people say something along the lines, well, at least you got out safely, or at least you're still here. And on one hand, that is great. We are glad that they are here and safe. However, it doesn't minimize the things that they've lost in the process. And sometimes I know that we all have things of sentimental value to us. I had a client who worked fiercely. She had left this domestic violence relationship. She worked fiercely to get a job, to become a manager at her job, earn a savings. She noticed that she was working so many hours in a day and didn't engage in any self-care. So she bought herself a TV within the exchange of her children with the abusive partner. Abusive partner broke her TV. And, she came into my office because prior to prevention education, I did direct client services, working with survivors. So she came into the office and said, I don't know why I'm so sad about this TV. And she cried and cried and cried. And we processed that a little bit. And, she was able to share with me that maybe it's because I worked so hard to get it. I've gone through so much, and, I finally gave myself something for myself. I bought this TV so that I can relax and, just sit down for a minute and maybe watch something without having so many, so much life in my head, right? How am I going to get my children fed every day? How am I going to get them to school? And that was taken from her, again, by her abusive partner. So destruction of victims' personal property can be very damaging. Threats of violence to self. So if you break up with me, I will kill myself or I will hurt myself. That's very manipulative, right? It's trying to keep someone responsible for another person's actions. Name calling, blackmail, gaslighting. These are all very common in emotional, verbal. Yeah. Oh, what do I mean by gaslighting? So gaslighting is making someone believe something happened when they know it did not happen. So basically a very intense form of lying, making them believe something. So I had a client who woke up one morning with bruises on their body, and they said, they went up to their abusive partner and said, like, you did this to me. I can't believe you did this to me. Abusive partner said, no, you fell last night. That's what happened. You were drinking and you fell last night. The survivor said, no, you did this to me. Abusive partner says, you're crazy. You don't know what you're talking about. And so that's gaslighting, making them feel like something happened or something was said, making them feel crazy. Yeah. Thank you, Thomas. Alrighty, so social abuse. Can someone time check me real quick? 9:30. Okay, 9:35. We're gonna try to wrap it up so we can ask any questions. 9:40. So isolation, public humiliation, turning folks against you, rumors and lies, and controlling who you see. isolation plays a major part in domestic violence. When someone feels alone, they feel isolated, when they don't have any support, it is harder to leave a relationship. We oftentimes have survivors come to us and say, literally, I had no one. My family decided that they don't want to support me anymore because I've gone back to this relationship 5 times. On average, it'll take a survivor leaving 7 times before they decide to leave for good. And so I think that's where community steps in and says, I will support you on that 8th time that you decided to leave. You know, I do understand, and as a movement, we understand that it could be frustrating for us as folks who are supporting them, but we also want to be empathetic and understand what they may be going through in trying to leave the relationship. We don't know what threats came by their phone saying, if you don't come back, I will hurt you, your family, our children. We don't know that side of the story. All we see is them going back to their relationship. So we want to understand that, you know, it's going to take a while for them to be able to make that leap of faith or that step to be able to leave a relationship. Yes.
My experience in working with this population is that financial dependence upon that person.
Absolutely.
For the survival. So many times it's like I can't afford to, especially with children, to give up a home.
Right.
And that's a huge manipulation.
Absolutely. Yeah, folks online, so Sandy mentioned the financial dependence and how that can be an extreme barrier to leaving an abusive relationship, which is absolutely true. So we just, there it goes. So financial abuse, that can look like creating an allowance for someone weekly or monthly, or not letting them have any allowance at all, sabotaging their work or school, stalking at work. If someone's calling you multiple times a day, you are less likely to get the work done that you need to do. Or if someone's threatening you, you're likely to be focused more on that versus your work. Forcing you to work, stealing money, gifts with strings attached. Something that's not on here is ruining credit and not letting you establish any credit. We all know, we're all adults. Your credit really kind of owns you as you navigate life, right? Do you want to rent an apartment? What's your credit score? Do you want to purchase a car? What's your credit score? Get a credit card, whatever it is, you do have to have a credit score that is manageable enough to get a credit card. Or when you don't have any credit card at all, or credit score at all. And that could look like very manipulative, right? It could be like, don't worry, I will provide for you. You don't need a credit card. It's not all physical and aggressive, right? It doesn't have to look like you will not have a credit card. I will not allow you to have a credit card. It could be very gentle and kind, and someone could feel taken care of by that. But we know that, you know, oftentimes those folks have an ulterior motive. So we have seen through COVID, cyber abuse kind of take a leap and really become excessive, tracking folks through their phone, through apps. We know that younger folks use a lot of just newer apps that are popular, and those newer apps have tracking devices, and they will tell you where each one of your friends are, each one of, you know, the people that you follow are. So that can be really problematic. And I'm so torn between technology, right? It's so helpful. This is helpful. Folks at home are able to do things, but it also can be very damaging and very toxic for people who abuse technology. So that can be problematic. Sexual abuse, rape, sexual assault, sexual manipulation, sexual harassment, and sexual exploitation. We do want to just note that sexual abuse can happen within a marriage, and we know that that is very, very common. And unfortunately, this did not get legalized. Sexual abuse within marriage was not legalized until 1994, which is saddening, but we do know that it does happen very often. So at House of Ruth, we talk about just the idea of not teaching our children, don't get raped versus teaching them don't rape or don't sexually assault someone, don't sexually harass someone. And so that is part of the prevention education department. And what we talk about is we want to educate our children just around the idea of we are responsible for our own actions and ultimately, you know, don't do something to someone that they don't want. So spiritual abuse, this can be the misusing of religious teachings, not allowing the victim to attend their place of worship, forcing someone to convert to their religion, denying the existence of someone's God. And if the couple is married, divorce may not be an option for them. I had a client that I worked closely with for over 2 years. She was, you know, committed to her religion, and for her, she'd been married for 35 years and knew that her marriage was abusive and said, I want to work through this marriage. I want to now, when my husband is abusive, I don't want to leave the relationship. I want to learn how to cope through the abuse. I don't want to leave the relationship. Divorce is not something that I want to do. And so I think it's important to note that House of Ruth will walk through that with someone. We are not here to say, you need to leave your abusive relationship. You should leave your abusive relationship. Those 2 words we try not to use because what it's saying is your partner is controlling you and we are going to control your actions too. And that's not okay. That's not something that we stand for. So we will walk alongside this person, and I did for 2 years, you know, understanding when the height of the abuse was happening, what should they do then, you know, or if abuse was highly likely during dinner time. During dinner time, we safety plan what looks safe for you at this moment. And so this can be very, very common. We do know that a lot of abusive folks use scripture against victims and saying, you know, the Bible says, or, you know, whatever form of religious teaching that they do use, using that against them. The cycle of violence. So it starts right here at the honeymoon phase. Then the honeymoon phase looks like, I love you so much. I'm so happy we're in this relationship. I love you, I love you, I love you. And then it goes to the tension building phase where we feel like we're walking on eggshells. We don't feel comfortable with this person. We feel like at any moment they could turn and say something or turn and do something. So it's very unpredictable. And then the explosion phase happens. And I know explosion sounds very violent, but that could be any form of abuse. So it could be an emotional form of abuse. It could be financial abuse. You're not getting any money this week. You are, you know, worthless. No one's gonna love you. Or it also could very well be violent. But then it goes right back up to the honeymoon phase of, I'm so sorry that happened. I promise it'll never happen again. I love you. I want to fight for this relationship. And when someone is saying those things to you, you want nothing more than to believe them and to have hope for this relationship, to have hope for this marriage. You know, so oftentimes we believe that. And so what's in the middle of the cycle of violence that keeps it going is hope, love, and fear. Hope that this relationship is going to work out. Hope that this person is going to be different. Love, genuine love for this person, right? We don't get to define what love means for someone else. And if they feel love, who are we to take that away from them? So, you know, love that they experience. And it didn't start out violent, right? It didn't start out abusive. So they're hanging on to that relationship from what it looked like at the beginning. And then fear, genuine fear that this could end very scary and very dangerous if they decide to. All right, so a few reasons as to why victims and survivors stay. Again, love, fear, shame or guilt. We live in a very shame and victim blaming society. Things like, I can't believe you're still in that relationship. I can't believe you stayed for so long. What were you thinking? Why, you know, why? Versus how can I support you? How can I, walk you through this season of your life? We live in something very opposite. False hopes. A lot of survivors have said, I stayed for my children. And I do want to note that although someone may be abusive to one parent, it is less likely that they're abusive to their children. Oftentimes they're great parents to the children. And that can be very confusing for someone, right? Like, I want to do what's best for my children, so I'm going to stay, even though I have to sacrifice my own well-being for it. Lack of information and resources, and then the acceptance of violence. This is just the way that marriage or a relationship works. Oftentimes, maybe they saw domestic violence happen in their own home, and it's very normalized for them. I saw this growing up. This is what my parents did. This is just the way that life is. But also times, many folks didn't grow up in an abusive relationship, and they have come to a place where they accept the violence just because it's been going on for so long. And then that emotional or economic dependence that we had talked about. It's very difficult for someone to leave when they are financially dependent on someone else. And I hate to say that because, living in California specifically, a 2-income household is still difficult to get by. So if you are a working person and, leaving could still be very difficult. So yeah, I just want to note that. All right. Is it around 9:40? Okay, awesome. So we want to talk about how you can help a survivor and victim. So we don't often get churches or congregations wanting to discuss this topic because it is very taboo, and a lot of folks don't know how to help a survivor, or maybe a lot of folks believe that, you should work through this relationship, especially if you are married. So again, I want to say thank you for having us, but ultimately we want you all to feel confident in helping someone maybe at the church who confides in you and shares this with you, how to support them and how to kind of, again, just walk alongside them as they navigate this. So bringing up the subject with them is a start. If you notice anything that seems off in their marriage, in their relationship, saying, hey, so-and-so, I noticed that when we were hanging out last week, Joe, or Sally, or whoever this is, talked to you in a way that was very degrading and seemed really toxic. Are you okay? Do you want to talk about it? And I know that can seem really scary because you don't want to step on any toes or make someone feel uncomfortable, but bringing up the subject with them in a way that shows kindness can really be a start to them leaving their relationship or remaining safe. Oftentimes they will not be the one to bring it up to you. Again, there's a lot of shame around that. So bringing up the subject with them and then identifying the behavior. So, I saw last week, it sounded really degrading. I just want to make sure that you're okay. And if they say something like, yes, I am okay, they were having a really bad day, they're really stressed at work, it's not their typical self. Don't buy into that denial. Saying, I understand, we all get stressed, we all have bad days at work. I don't think you deserve that kind of treatment. And that's not okay. Okay. So a lot of the times survivors or victims will feel obligated to cover up or to minimize or to stand up for the abusive partner. Our job is to kind of say, I love you and I don't want to see you get treated that way. We all have stressful days, but we don't go out and treat people that way. We have to be able to manage our behavior. And then also listening from a non-judgmental place. That's a survivor's biggest fear, right? Is that someone's going to judge them. So non-judgmental place and ultimately believing them. That is our number one job, right? As someone who's supporting someone who's leaving an abusive relationship or in an abusive relationship is to believe them. Not saying something like, say they disclose to you and you say, that can't happen, they're so kind. I couldn't even imagine that they would do something like that. Right off the bat, that survivor is gonna shut you out. They're not gonna tell you anything again because they needed to hear something else. They needed to hear, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. Do you feel comfortable sharing more? Support and validate them. Again, I'm so sorry. How can I support you? What do you need from me? Thank you for telling me. You can say something along the lines of, no one deserves to be treated that way. You know, you are a worthy person of healthy love, and providing options and not advice. So again, this person is coming from a very controlling space, whether that be controlling who they see, controlling what they wear, whether they work or not. They're coming from a controlling world. And so it's not for us to say, you know, hey, you should call this hotline. Hey, you should go to this shelter. Hey, you should really leave this relationship. Something along the lines of an option would be much, much more supportive. Hey, thank you so much for telling me. There's this hotline that I know of. If you ever needed to call, let me know and I can support you with that. Or hey, this is a list of agencies that I found in our area. If you ever needed help, let me know. I can go with you. Just options. Staying away from the words should and need. You need to do this, you should do that. Can be very helpful for someone. Alrighty, so creating a safety plan for them is very helpful. I won't go through all of it, but you know, if they share a situation that is abusive, walking through or going over something that could be helpful for them. If they decide to leave, when is the safest time to leave? When is your partner at work? You know, do you have someone that you could talk to or go to for financial support? Things like that would be really helpful. All right, so that kind of concludes the presentation. I know that was fairly fast, but if y'all have any questions or comments, I would love to hear from you. This is my contact information. If you ever needed support with a friend or a family member who was going through something, or if you wanted to have more information on domestic violence, you could always reach out to me and I would really appreciate and love to help. Does anyone have any questions? Any folks online? Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Again, we're really thankful to be at UCC, but also just a church in general. These conversations don't happen very often, which is really sad to me. And I think that, the church is a place where folks go to feel supported and feel loved. And if this topic isn't being talked about, and this is something that a lot of folks are going through, 1 in 4 women, 1 in 7 men, 1 in 3 teens, that is quite a few people. One of our 4 friends will be going through that. And so we want to make sure that we are confident enough to support them. So thank you all so much. Thank you. I am, oh my goodness, I am off the chat. I'm sorry, online folks. Let me see. Okay, Mel, I'm so sorry. Yes, hate and violence continue to grow within the US. Okay, so what about incidents of violence in same gender relationships? That is something that is extremely under talked about. We do know that folks in the LGBTQ+ community experience violence at a much higher rate. And it's something that's not talked about because it's not reported. So what happens is, if someone in a same-sex relationship is going through an abusive incident, they call the police get there, and let's just say this is 2 men in a relationship. The one partner will disclose the abuse, and then the police officer will note it as an altercation between roommates. And so that is why it is extremely underreported and why we don't have accurate statistics around same-sex relationships. So that happens very often. And it's problematic, right? We don't have the right statistics around the high amounts of violence that this community is facing. All right, let me see. Thank you so much, Rick. Oh no, I've never even heard that song, Mel, but that's scary. So can you all see it? It says the Beatles song "Run for Your Life" is a violent threat song. I'd rather see dead little girl than to be with another man. That's so sad. And actually, like, media is extremely, we see a lot of forms of songs and movies that really depict domestic violence or glamorize domestic violence and promote violence within media. So thanks for highlighting that, Mel. Examples of behavior in high places, so business, politics, sport. I used to work for a very short amount of time before I came back to House of Ruth, because I realized that my heart was at House of Ruth, but I worked in an agency in Orange County, another domestic violence agency, where we saw a lot of white collar domestic violence. So, CEOs, doctors, lawyers, a lot of my clients, their partners were lawyers, and, we see that a lot of folks within positions of authority cannot let go of that authority within their home and within their marriage, within their relationships. So they bring that there. We do know that police officers, lawyers, doctors, unfortunately, pastors and firefighters, among those professions, we see a lot of violence come from just folks who have more power and more authority. Lynn, for any of us who have stayed in a job that was not good for us, we might ask ourselves, why did I stay? We may see that our reasons are similar to those listed. Absolutely, yeah. Safety, security, all of that, right? What kind of donations does House of Ruth or the House of Walking Clinic need? We actually have a website that has has a list of things that the House of Ruth is seeking. It's a wish list from our clients and from the children that we serve. So that is on our website.